Hi, I'm Mary Egbert from Kamaj Handspun Yarns, and I would like to show you today how to dye this beautiful Leicester wool. It has a lot of crimp in it and curls, and you know, if you have any other fibers like mohair or any other fiber that has some crimp in it, this is like the coolest way to dye this yarn. So I'm going to show you how to kettle dye some Leicester wool today. Okay, so I have a big pot with about 6.5 to 7 quarts of water, and I'm starting to boil it. I don't want it to come to a full rolling boil because I don't want the fiber that's in the pot being boiled because it's going to felt it. Remember that agitation we talked about? You don't want to felt your fiber. Also, I use citric acid crystals. A lot of people use vinegar, but I find that this works a little bit better. I may use vinegar kind of near the end of the process if I find out that the dye isn't being absorbed as much. So I'm going to put in about 1/4 cup of the crystals. Okay, then I'm going to stir it up. Now I always use utensils specifically for dyeing. I don't want to use the same pot or the same utensils to cook with and feed my family because, you know, the dyes can be a little toxic and can make you sick. So the crystal is all dissolved in the pot. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I have this little nifty little thing called the Wrap Master, and it holds saran wrap. So what I do is I put it, and I'm going to move my pot just to show you how this works. It has little rubber feet so it sticks to the countertop kind of, and you just pull the saran wrap and then you cut it. So now I have a protected surface for my dyes because my husband would kill me if I got dyes on the countertops. So I'm very careful. So he lets me to continue to dye in the kitchen. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back over. I soaked my fiber in some synthropol before I dyed it. Some people like to use a little vinegar. Either way works. I used about 2 teaspoons for a pound of fiber in the sink. And I just let it soak for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And again, it's really hot water. Don't change the temperature of your water. I usually dye right after I wash fiber, and I do it in small loads because I want to make sure the fiber is still hot when I put it in my dye pot. So the colors we're going to use today are Country Classics Poppy Red, Buttercup Classic Country, and an Iceberg, and this is the gay wool dyes. They're a little bit different. The Country Classics are really fine, and this is a little bit more of a crystal. So I'm going to put them on my saran wrap. Again, don't want to get in trouble. So I have a little spoon that I use specifically for dyeing. It's just a teaspoon. And my water looks like it's about ready, so I'm going to turn it down to about a medium because I don't want a rolling boil, but I still want it to stay really hot. Okay, so here's my washed fiber, and I'm going to put it right into the pot. It's kind of a whitish wool, but it has some yellow tips that don't wash out, which I really like the yellow tips because then the color variation is really cool because you'll get a different color on the whiter parts than you will the yellow parts. And I'm just going to gently submerge it into the water. You don't want to agitate, don't want to stir a lot. I'm using a pound of fiber because I want it pretty packed because I don't want, when I put the dye in, I don't want it to go all the way through the fiber at first. I want it to kind of dye a little section, then I'm going to put some more dye in. And you're going to see that. I'm going to bring the camera up close. So here's my fiber in the pot ready to be dyed. Now I like to use color wheels. And a lot of people don't use them. They kind of just throw in color. But color wheels are very scientific and very exact. It shows you what colors you can mix with what colors to get other colors. If I just add everything, I'm going to end up with a brown. Now if I don't want a brown, I don't want to do that. But if I want a brown, it's okay. But, you know, for instance, say if you're adding yellow to red, it'll give you an orange. So this is really awesome to use. Also, if you turn it over, let's say I want to dye something orange. If I look at the complementary color, it's going to be blue. If I look at split complementary, I'm going to add purple, green, and orange. So it's almost like dyeing for dummies, but it's really an exact scientific thing, color, and you want to do a little bit of studying with the color wheel before you go ahead and dye. You just don't want to throw any color with any color. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to put on some rubber gloves, and these are just gloves that you'd find in the hospital, and I prefer these to the gloves that you use for washing dishes because I can feel a little bit better through the glove. You don't want to get the dye in your hands and put your hands in your mouth or whatever. All right, so here's the blue, and this has, it's kind of a crystal-y kind of thing. I really just kind of sprinkle it on, but you know, just for measurement's sake, let's go ahead. Now this spoon's about a teaspoon, so we'll put about a teaspoon on. I'm just gonna sprinkle it. And I really just want to do one section of the fiber at first. I don't want to do the whole thing because I want it to blend with other colors and not make the whole fiber this color. So I'm just going to gently push down to kind of get those crystals in the water. I'm not going to push very hard or stir it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of let this sit for maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. And I can already see the blue mixing with the yellow tips turning green, so that's really cool. All right, so we'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay, so you can see that the red, above the red, the dye is all absorbed. See, the water's clear. Okay, and of course by the green it's all clear. So now what we're going to do is kind of flip the fiber gently. And you can see there's still some white fleece or areas that weren't dyed underneath. And that's where I'm going to put my next color. All right, so we are going to use Buttercup, which is the yellow. All right, I'm going to take almost a teaspoon, kind of about a teaspoon, sprinkle it on, kind of push it down and to absorb in that fiber. And I kind of changed my mind because that's what gals are allowed to do. I'm going to add a little orange. Okay, so I'm just going to sprinkle it in. Again, not putting too much. You know, you don't want to overload your pot with dyes because it just won't absorb. And that's a lot of the problem that people say they have is, you know, they put their vinegar in, they put their citric acid in, it just didn't absorb the dyes. Well, they're probably using a little bit too much dye. So, you know, I would either go by the directions on the container or just start out a little bit at a time. You can always add more later on, you know, and you can always kind of mix it up. So I'm going to let this kind of sit again for about 10 or 15 minutes and hopefully it'll be done. Okay, so we're done with the dyeing, and now what we're going to do is strain it. And I like to use a big metal strainer. Of course, I don't put any other food in this because I'm putting dye in it. So I set it in the sink, and I take my big pot, and then I just pour it in the strainer. Okay, so then I have all my dye in a strainer. And I'm just going to put it through one more rinse. So I'll fill the sink up with hot water, just submerge it for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to put it on a towel, and then we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so here's the fiber all done. I mean, this is gorgeous. Blues and yellows, pinks and reds and greens. I mean, that turned out really pretty. I mean, check this out. Look at the little yellow tips with the green and the blue. So pretty. Okay, so that's all rinsed. Now, sometimes people put oils in their fibers, so I might just put a little bit of like a Moroccan oil or something like that on your hand, and you would just kind of squeeze it through the fiber just very gently. It gives it a nice scent. If you want, you can squeeze it out in your towel. And then just lay it out in your skirting table or your sweater dryer, and you're all set to go. Now you got some really gorgeous fleece.